We think about big birthdays like 40 or 50. But what about that feeling as you get closer to 60? That quiet kind of, okay, what's next moment.
Yeah, it's a really interesting transition point.
So today, we're diving deep into exactly that. Not just generic advice, but really looking at it through the eyes of someone who's, well, living it with real intention.
Mm.
Whether you're, years away, right in the middle of it, or maybe just curious about what's down the road. Think of this as a sort of inside look at life after 60.
Getting beyond the usual cliches.
Exactly. We want to pull out some practical wisdom, stuff you can actually use to really flourish in this chapter. And we've zeroed in on 3 big shifts that often catch people by surprise.
Okay.
First, this kind of need for personal reevaluation, maybe even reorganization. Second, this wave of freedom that can actually feel a bit disorienting.
Right, almost too much freedom sometimes.
And third, just the plain fact that we're living so much longer now, which demands a whole new way of thinking. So yeah, let's really get into it.
Okay, well, the first thing that really jumps out from the source material is this massive shift in our actual lifespan.
How so?
It's not like the old model anymore, work till 65, then a few quiet years. With longevity increasing, the time after 60 could genuinely be as long as your entire working life from, say, 20 to 60.
Wow, okay. That's huge. A whole second adult life, potentially.
Exactly. And that forces you to completely rethink how you approach this stage. It's not just winding down.
Right. The source uses that phrase, duplex life. Like you need to build a second story onto your existing life.
Precisely. It's not just external stuff like stopping work. It's a deep internal shift, too.
Yeah, touching on some pretty profound emotional things, maybe even philosophical ones.
Definitely. Internally, you've got the classic Hana empty nest syndrome, the source mentions. For decades, maybe your focus was kids, family,
Right.
and suddenly that primary focus shifts. That can be a real jolt emotionally.
Yeah.
Then add retirement on top of that. All this unscheduled time opens up, which sounds great, and it is liberating, but it can also trigger this feeling of, well, what's my purpose now?
That question of what defines me when work and maybe intense parenting aren't the main things anymore.
Yeah, that feeling of maybe being useless isn't too strong a word sometimes. It comes up.
And I guess that feeds into what the source calls the philosophical struggle, that old mindset of, I'm leaving soon. Like you're just coasting.
Right, just waiting it out.
That just doesn't work if you might have another 30, 40 years ahead of you.
It's completely outdated. The source really pushes back against that passivity. How can you spend potentially decades just waiting?
You risk looking back with a lot of regret, don't you? Thinking about missed chances if you don't actively engage.
Absolutely. Which leads us perfectly into the guide part of this. The source offers 3 really essential preparations for making the most of this time.
Okay.
And the first one is about securing your scholarship, Arnell, but not the kind you might think.
Okay, a scholarship for yourself. Let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, you hit your 60s and you think, finally, time for hobbies, travel, learning that thing I always wanted to learn.
That desire to explore those deferred dreams, it's strong.
Definitely.
But the obstacle the source points out is often, well, money. Specifically, personal funds dedicated to those things beyond just covering the bills.
Right. So you might be okay for groceries and utilities.
Yeah.
But what about paying for that language class or the materials for painting or that trip?
Exactly. And that's where the scholarship idea comes in. It's about having a reliable, consistent income stream separate from work income, maybe like a personal pension that actually enables you to pursue those interests.
Okay, that makes sense. It's fuel for personal enrichment.
Yeah.
And the source had a personal story about this.
Yeah, a really good one. The speaker talks about making these almost small investments in personal pensions way back in their late 30s, early 40s. Didn't seem like a huge deal then. But now, decades later, those decisions are providing this steady income, this scholarship that lets them do what they want without constantly stressing about the cost. They even said they underestimated how important it would be.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
So the message for people maybe in their 40s or 50s listening now is start thinking about this now.
Absolutely. Think about how you can build that foundation, that personal scholarship fund, so you have real freedom later. What steps could someone take, you think?
Well, I guess exploring options like personal retirement accounts, maybe talking to a financial advisor to see what makes sense for their situation. Even small, consistent steps early on seem key.
Definitely.
Okay, let's move to the second preparation. This one's called determined physical strength. going 3
Huh.
sounds more intense than just stay healthy.
It is. It's more intentional. The source really hammers home the link between habits built up over decades and the chronic health stuff that tends to show up around your 60s.
Like high cholesterol, blood pressure, maybe diabetes.
Exactly. It frames them as the good again, coming out, the visible result of years of choices finally adding up. It's not like they just appear out of nowhere.
Hmm. It's like all those things you vaguely knew you should do, eat better, move more suddenly, have real names, real diagnoses in your 60s.
Right. And then the worry sets in, doesn't it? How will this limit my freedom? Can I actually enjoy this time if I'm dealing with health issues? It becomes very real.
So the insight here is that your habits today are literally shaping your future health and your ability to enjoy that duplex life later on.
Precisely. It contrasts those vague intentions we all have when we're younger with the concrete consequences later. It's a stark reminder, really.
And didn't the source speaker share something personal here too, like a regret?
Yeah, they were quite open about wishing they'd made more determined, consistent, healthy choices earlier. They're facing the consequences now. It really drives home the urgency.
So what's a practical takeaway? What's one determined change that someone in their 40s or 50s could actually make?
The source suggests focusing on just one thing, but making it a real commitment. Maybe it's a 30-minute walk 3 times a week, consistently. Or making one specific healthy food swap every day.
Okay.
The key is that determined part, making a firm decision, not just a fleeting thought, because those small changes, done consistently over years, they compound. They make a huge difference.
Right, consistency over intensity sometimes. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. So the third preparation is about exercise capacity, but it's broader than just hitting the gym, isn't it?
Yeah, much broader. This is fascinating. The source expands exercise to include intellectual activity, social engagement, hobbies, keeping your mind and social life active too.
Interesting. So being active in different ways.
Exactly. And the observation is pretty clear. People who are still vibrant and engaged in their 60s and beyond, mentally sharp, socially connected, pursuing interests, they were usually the ones who kept that kind of active lifestyle going through their 40s and 50s.
So it's about maintaining momentum across the board.
It seems so. It connects to that internal drive, wanting to stay curious, connected, feeling relevant as you get older.
And the risk, I suppose, is that if you become inactive in middle age, that inertia just gets harder and harder to break later on.
That's the danger. The source suggests that the shock of turning 60, if you haven't kept those fires burning your interests, your connections could actually lead to more withdrawal, more isolation. And it kind of busts that myth, doesn't it? That you can just flick a switch at 60 and suddenly become this super active, engaged person if you haven't been practicing it.
Yeah, you can't just decide to suddenly love learning French or join 5 clubs if you haven't built up that muscle for engagement earlier.
Right. It's about building that exercise capacity in all these areas throughout your middle years.
So the advice is basically start living the life you want in your 60s now. If you want to travel then, maybe start planning smaller trips now. If you want community, nurture those friendships today.
Practice the lifestyle. Build those muscles. Mental, social, physical, so they're strong when you enter that next big phase.
Okay, so bringing it all together, this idea of transformation, really stepping into that duplex life. We need the financial scholarship, the determined physical strength, and this broad exercise capacity.
Yeah, and they're not separate things, are they? They all work together. They're the pillars supporting a really vibrant later life.
And that duplex idea really lands. It's not an ending, it's a major new chapter that needs real investment in yourself.
And the source even hints at, maybe a three-obolo triplex life as longevity increases further.
Okay, wow. More floors to build.
It just reinforces the need for that long-term forward thinking. But the really exciting part of this transformation, I think, is that as you move to these higher floors, your perspective changes.
You see things differently.
Yeah, new possibilities open up. But you need the resources, the money, the health, the engagement to actually grab those opportunities.
Right, so preparing now isn't just about avoiding problems.
No, it's about actively building the capacity for a richer, more meaningful, more fight. The source used the word charming life, a life with appeal and vibrancy.
That's a great way to put it. So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is, which floor are you building right now? Are the choices you're making today setting you up for that vibrant life later?
It really comes down to that. A great life after 60 isn't accidental.
No, it's something you actively create. By focusing on these 3 areas, your personal resources, your determined health, and your overall engagement.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this deep dive gave you some valuable things to think about.